Liam. In his ultrasound, he would always play with like his hands and his feet, and it reminded me of his sister.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being on Still a Part of Us with us today, and I'm looking so forward to hearing about your sweet Liam. So thank you so much again for your time. Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, we are excited to meet you, and tell us about who you are and what your family looks like, when the time that Liam was born, and maybe kind of where you guys are at right now, like in the country, so that people kind of have an idea of where you're at.
Yeah. So my name's Rebecca. I live in Indiana. I actually haven't always lived here. I lived in Nevada and Utah for a while.
Oh,
And when, yeah, so when I was 16, I moved in with my mom and her husband and his two of three children at the time. And then fast forward to 2019, I met my fiance,
okay.
and we just kind of we moved fast. Actually, I was not really expecting to move as fast as we did, but
Oh,
it just kind of happened.
uh-huh.
He had a daughter on the way. Her mom was like 2 months away from having her
Okay.
when we originally met, and she came like 3 weeks early. And then I actually met my stepdaughter when she was 3.5 months old.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And we started to try for our family. Like, we wanted a baby. I was like, well, he's a really good dad. Why not? Let's try it. Worst thing that's gonna happen is I'm gonna have a baby, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And it sounds like
so
you guys want family. Like, you want kids.
yeah,
That was okay.
yeah. So I was like, let's do it. So it took us a year to get pregnant. And on August 23rd of 2020, I got pregnant. And
Okay.
it was my first pregnancy test that was positive after a year of negatives and disappointment. I actually had an appointment set up to see my gynae in
Mm-hmm.
like mid-September and September to see why I wasn't getting pregnant.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And then like a month before my appointment, I had positive.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, and my first ultrasound was the 28th of August,
Okay.
and everything was fine.
Everything looks
Normal.
good.
hmm
Okay.
October 3rd, we announced to everyone on social media, everything,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we're pregnant, you know. And then, so I had a liver transplant when I was a baby.
Oh, okay.
And so my pregnancies are already considered high risk
Right.
just because
Yes.
of that.
Just for that sheer, yeah,
Yeah.
point.
And I don't have to take any medication. I was like a part of a trial when I was a kid
Mm-hmm.
to like wean myself off,
Oh,
or,
okay.
or to be weaned off by the doctors. And I did better off the meds than I was on the meds.
So, and these kind of medications, let me just make sure that I'm assuming it's like anti-rejection medications for the liver.
Yep.
Okay, because
hmm
those are heavy duty. Everybody, I don't know if you know this,
Yeah.
but it's basically medications that weaken your immune system to a certain extent, so they don't attack your liver, because they want
Correct.
your liver to stay intact. I mean, like, you just got
Yeah.
a piece of an organ from somebody that is not your own, and so your body will attack it. So
Yeah.
you basically you were not on any immunosuppressives or.
I got my transplant when I was like 16 months old.
Mhm.
And then I started seeing the doctors in California since I was in Nevada.
Mhm.
Um, and the trial was like in LA, and she took me off, and I excelled. And I was about
Wow.
9.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a big deal,
So
you guys.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I
Yeah.
was on such a low dose. They're like, what happens if we just take her off?
Yeah. Just kind of take
You
her off
know?
that. Yeah, because usually, yeah, you get to a steady state of
Yeah.
where you can be at. So,
So,
wow, that's crazy. Rebecca, before we go too much farther, I just
yeah,
want to back up really fast, and I wanted to say, when was Liam born? How long ago has it been since Liam was born at the time of this recording?
December 1st will be 2 years.
Yeah, and we are just coming up on that in like a month, you guys. So
Yeah.
it's coming up here really,
I
really
was like, how do
soon,
I do this
actually.
math?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's perfect. So yes, it was in December of
20.
2020. Yeah,
Yeah.
2020. Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to
You're
make
welcome.
sure
No, you're good.
that I wanted to give everybody some context on how long it's been since he passed away. So,
Almost
okay,
2 years.
so you and your fiance are pretty excited about this. Was he excited also? Because it sounds like he wanted kids as well.
Yeah. He wants a big family.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he wants like 5 or 6 kids. And I'm like, how about 4?
We'll compromise, right?
Meet in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, we were really excited. We were actually not going to find out the gender
Oh,
because my mom didn't with me and then his parents didn't with him. And
really?
so, yeah, we were like, and his brother either. And so we were like, maybe we won't find out the gender, and just kind of be like surprised when he comes.
Yeah.
But at that first MFM appointment with maternal fetal medicine,
Yes.
I was like, I need to know.
Ah! You're like, sorry,
Like,
I
yeah,
really need to know.
yeah. So yeah,
When was that first appointment with the maternal fetal medicine?
October 14th
Okay, so
of
that was one.
2020.
Okay, so your first appointment with the MFM was in October. Now, because of your previous liver transplant, you are high risk.
Yep.
But then, so what were some of the things that did they bring up anything that of great concern because of that?
Honestly, no. So my aunt was my primary care physician's nurse practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've seen my PCP since I was 16.
Yeah.
So it was 11 years at this point.
Yeah.
And they referred me to someone my doctor went to college with.
Okay.
And so I went and I saw her, and she's the MFM. And it was just supposed to kind of be like a, hi, I'm Dr. So and so. Like, I'm just going to kind of monitor your scans, make sure baby's growing properly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just a general appointment. With me not being on medication, they were like, you're going to have a normal pregnancy, right?
Right.
As normal as it can be.
Yeah, exactly.
And they like put me in this room and they're doing the ultrasound, the nurses, and it's taking a while. Like looking back on it, I'm like, wow, that was a long scan,
Mm-hmm.
and probably one of the longest scans I had. And I'm like, okay, didn't think anything of it at the time. She has me like still laying down, gel on my belly, runs and goes and gets the doctor.
Okay.
And she was like, I just have to talk to the doctor real quick and I'll be back. And now looking back on that, I was like, they were gone for a while. Like, and I don't know why it wasn't like triggering to me. Like, I don't know. I guess I think like I thought she was still in with the patient,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
why it was taking a minute. But she
Oh,
came
and
in.
was your fiance with you, or was it just you at this
No,
appointment?
I could only go by myself because of COVID.
Okay, yeah, that's right. We got to always kind of consider that all the restrictions around that time that you were
Yeah.
pregnant. So, yeah,
Like my
so
mom couldn't come with me. He couldn't come with me. And like I was kind of annoyed because I was like, I want him to see our baby,
yeah,
and
totally.
no, no. And they're like, with it being high risk and other high risk women, like we can only allow you at this time. And I'm like, okay. And my mom was actually in a meeting for work when I was like being scanned and at this appointment. And then my fiance he was my boyfriend at the time,
Hmm.
was working. and wasn't available either.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was like, okay. So I went to this
Yeah.
appointment
Yeah.
and she came in and she's like, hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so. Unfortunately, I had bad news.
Oh,
And she was like, I need to look at the scans myself to confirm what I'm seeing on what she already did.
okay.
And she's like, is there someone you want to call to like take this information in with you? And I'm like, sure. So I tried calling my fiance. He didn't have his phone on him.
Yeah.
Couldn't call my mom. So I called my aunt. You know, she's a nurse practitioner. She might
Exactly.
understand a little bit more than what
That
I'm
yeah,
intaking.
that's
And the
smart.
entire time I just bawled.
You did.
I I know she was talking and she was explaining things and she was telling me what was going on. But
Mhm.
as soon as I heard your son is really, really sick and isn't going to make it to term, I shut down.
Oh,
Like I couldn't breathe. Wearing a mask
yeah.
and I was just crying because what do you mean my baby's not going to make it to term?
Yeah.
And so my aunt answered and she was at work and was like trying to take in what the doctor was saying and they were scanning him. And my aunt ended up leaving work to come and get me
Oh, good.
because I was in no place to drive.
Yeah.
So she had found what they call cystic hygroma,
Mhm.
which is excessive fluid, and his was so severe that it was like in his head and his neck and his lymph nodes
Oh,
at that
wow.
point.
Uh-huh.
And she said that I could come back a week later and my fiance could come with us.
Mhm.
And so
To
that
get
way
another
there,
scan?
yeah.
Okay.
And then we would kind of discuss further steps. She said sometimes that cystic hygroma can resolve on its own,
Mhm.
but with a case this severe, that was not going to be the outcome.
So she knew for sure, like, she could tell that it was bad, basically.
Hmm.
Did the doctor kind of just walk through what all that fluid, like, pointing out the fluid and
At
what
the
that looks
next
like?
appointment, yeah.
Okay, but not at that appointment because you were probably
I'm sure she tried to, but I couldn't breathe.
yeah,
I really couldn't. I was so upset and I couldn't comprehend what she was saying.
yeah.
She was using all the medical jargon and
Yes.
now I know what these words mean. At the time, no. And I really couldn't tell you what she said other than he was sick and the cystic hygroma. And then she was like, do you want to know what the sex is? And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
and we had wanted a boy, like he had his daughter,
Yeah.
and we wanted a boy. And she said, it's a boy. And she's like, it's a little early still to know. I was only 13 weeks.
Mhm.
Um, but she's like, it's looking like it's a boy. And I said, of course it is.
Yeah. Oh.
So, and then they stuck me in like a room behind my ultrasound room.
Uh-huh.
And I waited for my aunt to come get me. And then her and I called my mom together.
Oh. How was that call?
That was really hard. My mom was really excited when we told her. I remember like us telling her that the baby was really sick and she like gasped and started crying.
Oh.
And then I started crying again. And she was like, what do you mean the baby's sick? And my aunt was like, he has excessive fluid buildup in his lymph nodes and that she can come back for a scan next week and kind of see where baby's at.
Yeah.
And she said a lot of times with this cases like this is there's like a underlying heart defect.
Mm.
But right now with him being so small, we can't see that.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think my aunt tried to kind of be minimal of what she said just because I was still taking it in.
Yeah.
And she sent me like an article about what cystic hygroma was. And a lot of trisomies were coming up,
Mhm.
Turner syndrome and it was just some cases are more severe than others.
Yeah.
So,
So you called your mom and then told her.
mhm.
Did you end up, leaving the hospital after that time then to
Yeah, my
just head home?
aunt drove me to her house. We left my car.
Yeah.
Um, and then my mom and my stepdad brought it later. And then on the way to my aunt's house, I couldn't get a hold of my fiance.
Mhm.
At the time he was working for an oil company and was like cleaning a big oil tank, and so
Yeah.
he didn't have his phone on
Yeah,
him.
of course. Yeah.
But I had his coworker slash supervisor on Facebook, and I texted him and I said, I need Carl to call me. It's really important. And within like 15 minutes, he called me and I said, I need you to come and get me from my aunt's house. There's something wrong with the baby. And he said, okay. And I told him when he got here, my aunt and I would explain it to him.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't really remember if I told him what was wrong or if my aunt did.
Mhm.
That part's kind of hazy. But he did take off work to go with me back to the doctor the next week and kind of got more of a perspective of what was going
What
on.
was going on? What was his reaction when you guys told him?
He was crying. He's very, I don't know, I guess like textbook more than like emotional.
Mm,
Like when he has the facts, like he understands that, right?
gotcha. Okay.
Whereas like I'm very emotional. Um, so I guess we kind of balance each other
Yeah.
out in that
Yeah.
sense. But um, it was hard for him. It still is, I think, just because I've been very vocal about everything.
Right.
So, and he processes things differently.
Yeah.
But he was crying, and I remember from like all of when we found out when he was sick until months after we lost him, I would like wake up, especially when I was pregnant. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to go pee, right?
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
When we're pregnant, it happens.
Yep.
And it would be like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And he would just roll over and hold me
Mm,
until I like stopped and fell
yeah.
asleep. So, and he would cry, and
Yeah.
which was hard.
It's hard. Yeah, when you're both going through it, it's like, oh. Okay, so the week later you guys did both get to go in and go through that scan. What did the doctor say at that time? And kind of walk through what, like, kind of what options maybe that she talked about?
She did another scan, and she had like a printout of
Mhm.
a baby with cystic hygroma, and she like took a black Sharpie and drew extra fluid.
Mm.
And she said, this is what I could find on cystic hygroma, and this is how much fluid your son has. And it was like
A,
extreme.
a lot.
Like it went like way back.
Oh,
She said at that point, so at the first appointment, it was like his head, his neck, lymph nodes area, right? She said now it's like all the way down his back, like down to his bottom, and
mhm.
then in his legs, and was starting to go like into the abdomen.
So essentially, it sounds like for this particular diagnosis is that the fluid is just not. I mean, he's getting fluid from you, right? Like he's getting fluid from his surroundings, and but he's not able to remove that in a
Mm-mm,
sense, right?
no,
It's not getting flushed out. It's not being wasted in a sense. So
no.
so it's just accumulating. It's just basically
Yeah,
adding
so
to his
when you
body.
look it up, basically what it means is like the lymphatic system doesn't properly braid in the DNA braiding.
Okay.
So like it can get buildup of fluid,
Yeah.
and that's what happened with him. His lymph node system just
We're not doing
wasn't,
what yeah, what they were supposed to do. Okay.
yeah. So I called my OBGYN
Mhm.
after that appointment, and I said, I want a second opinion. She said that eventually his heart would stop, and that termination would be my next step.
Mm.
And I was like, I can't terminate my pregnancy without a second opinion. So I got a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Rebecca, really quickly, when you were there for that second scan,
yes,
could they visualize the heart a little bit better at that one
no,
or no? Okay.
no. And my mom actually sat in the parking lot since she couldn't come with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
us inside. And she just basically told us the fluid was worse, gave us this, it terrifies me still, picture of the fluid that she drew. And that termination would be the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I need a
Right.
second opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know what else to say. So I don't know. We got a second opinion.
So you called your OBGYN,
hmm
and what were you going to get a second opinion from her, or were you going to get a second opinion from a different MFM or a different provider of some sort?
He said that he would send over another, or he would send a referral, right? Because my primary care had given me the initial referral for this one.
Oh, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And I had seen OB, for my initial appointment
Mm-hmm.
with no scan yet. And then he knew that I was high risk, so I would have to see MFM eventually, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me to one that he works well with.
Okay. Okay.
And they were closer to our house. It was like 10-15 minutes, so that was nice versus 30 minutes
Mm.
um, to 45. So it was kind of nice. And I went into that appointment again by myself. And he had a genetics counselor there in office
Oh,
2 days a week, and I met with her too. It was the longest,
I'm
one
sh-
of the longest appointments. It
I
was
am
like a
sure.
2-hour appointment.
Yeah.
And my mom sat in the parking lot, and if I remember right, I think my stepdaughter was with her, and they like ate snacks and watched cartoons
And waited for 2 hours.
for two
Yeah.
hours because COVID, we weren't allowed
No.
anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
So they did a scan, and the doctor was really, really nice. And he was like, unfortunately, I found the same thing she did. And I was 15 weeks, and he said that he can kind of start to see the heart defect,
Oh,
but he didn't want to necessarily say it's 100% there just because,
still
you
very
know,
early to
yeah. So at that point, I started to go in for weekly viability checks,
mm,
which is very exhausting.
it really, really is. So you
Very.
decided that you were just going to yeah, I guess what was your decision after that second appointment then?
I decided to wait. I was holding on to hope that the fluid would resolve on its own.
Mhm.
I have a very strong faith background in Christianity,
Mhm.
and like growing up, we were always told like abortion you like don't do and stuff like that. And like obviously my circumstances are a little different, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
With They literally told me he had like a 1 to 3% chance of this fluid
actually resolving.
resolving.
So very
Yeah,
low.
it was less than 10%, and I was like, I need that 10% to hold on to.
Okay.
So we decided to continue seeing the doctor with the second opinion.
Okay.
Um, he was a little bit nicer to me, I felt.
Well, that's good. I mean, you need to be able to click with your provider. I think that's great
Yeah.
that you decided to go with him.
And he was closer,
Yeah.
and having to go weekly, like I needed that.
Yeah.
So a week later, I went back in, and
So that's like
um,
16 weeks, right? About
mhm,
16 weeks. Okay.
and he found that Liam had hypoplastic left heart syndrome.
Mm. Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that and how he described it to you.
So he drew me a little picture, and he said basically what happens with hypoplastic left heart syndrome is the left ventricles don't develop properly. So whereas the right ventricle is like this, the left is half the size.
Yeah.
And so his heart is pumping faster and working harder, and eventually it will stop on its own.
Mhm.
And I said, okay. And he said, now the fluid is in his arms, his legs, his
Mm.
neck and head, um, starting to go into the abdomen like we had seen at the other doctors. And I was now at the point that an amniocentesis would be available.
Mm.
And I said, okay. And they said that my fiance would be able to come with to that appointment since it was a procedure.
Mhm. And they were gonna do the amniocentesis to do genetic testing or additional
Yeah.
genetic testing?
Yeah. Because my regular OBGYN, he did a blood panel
Right.
for like the regular.
All the kind of the big things that you look
Mhm,
at. Okay.
those were all negative. The
Mhm.
other MFM did an extended blood panel
Oh, okay.
that all came back clear. Negative, nothing there.
Really?
Next step was an amniocentesis.
Okay.
So it was like 3 days later, we went in for the amnio,
Okay.
and it was painful,
Yeah, I'm sure.
very uncomfortable. We were like, why didn't I get a band-aid? Like, you put a needle in my belly.
Yeah. You didn't get
I
a
remember
Band-Aid?
that.
What?
No, they didn't put a Band-Aid on, and we always thought it was weird. Like, I'm like, am I bleeding? Like, I would check the entire way home, and like all that night, I was
Huh.
checking, and nothing. And like, I wasn't leaking. I didn't bleed.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
But we thought it was weird.
Yeah. That
I, I couldn't get a
I've
Band-Aid.
never had one before, so I'm like, I don't know what the regular procedures are. But that is funny that you're like, I feel
Yeah,
like something should be on there.
yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that, I mean, you had this amniocentesis about the genetic, so you can get more genetic information, but you talked about how you saw the genetic counselor at 15 weeks at the second opinion doctor. So
Mhm.
what did she say about your situation and yeah, what how Liam looked?
So she was really nice. We've seen her a couple times.
Mm,
She had like charts explaining like the different trisomies, Turners, cystic
okay.
hygroma. She was the one that explained in depth the lymphatic system and how like all that
Oh, okay.
worked.
Uh-huh.
And she said once I hit 16 weeks, I could do an amniocentesis.
Okay.
And she explained, I'm sure I have it somewhere in one of my notebooks, but and of course I can't find it. Um, the three different tests that they do for the amnio
Okay.
and what they are, what they look for. And the first one, it looked for any missing or added chromosomes.
Mhm.
The second looked for chromosomes that were in the wrong place or mirrored.
Yeah, okay.
And then the third one would check for Noonan syndrome and something else.
Okay. What is Noonan syndrome?
Noonan syndrome is what he ended up being diagnosed with,
Oh, okay.
which caused all of this.
All of these other things that okay.
hmm
Okay.
So, but we don't find that out until January, or we found out 2 weeks after we had him.
That from that genetic
hmm
the amniocentesis essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So 16 weeks you were able to do the amniocentesis. It was very uncomfortable, sounds like. And you're still going in weekly or
Yeah.
twice a week, right? To
That week was just twice a week just because
Mm.
the amnio.
Yes, okay.
And then I went back a week later, one for like a post-op
Mhm.
appointment to make sure I'm okay. And they say when you do a amniocentesis, there's a risk of miscarriage just because
Right.
they're messing with that field.
Exactly. Okay.
Um, and I went back a week later and I didn't see my doctor. My doctor was gone. I saw his partner
Mhm.
and he was just like, there's no change.
Mm.
And he's like, he'll see you back in a week.
Okay.
And I said, okay. It was the scan took longer than I saw the doctor that time. And I was like, okay. So I went back at 18 weeks. And he said I was now at risk for, or he found that Liam had hydrops.
Okay.
And what happens sometimes is with cystic hygroma, the fluid gets so much that it turns into hydrops.
Mhm.
And the fluid was in his head, his neck, his chest, his abdomen, his arms and legs. Like he was literally
He was
just,
so fluid overloaded.
yeah. So now he was moving his case to hydrops, which is more severe.
Yeah, completely.
And that because of that, now I was at risk for Mir syndrome.
Yes.
And nobody in my area even has ever heard of this. Like they were like, what is Mir syndrome? And basically what it does is it mirrors preeclampsia.
Mhm.
And when hydrops babies or with hydrops babies, they release a protein, a fluid, and send it to my placenta. And my placenta could rupture
Yeah.
and putting me at risk. And I could have severe swelling, hands and feet, um, headaches, dizziness, blood pressure issues, and it can be very fatal
Yeah.
if not treated.
Yeah, and done something at that time. So they basically saw they changed his well, not diagnosis, but they kind of almost added to his diagnosis that he had hydrops, which is this really is like all this extra fluid. It's and swelling on the baby itself. And
Hmm.
then so much that they can even look like a normal sized baby, right? Like
Yeah.
we've chatted with a mom before and they say, because my baby had hydrops, she looks like a normal baby, even though she was way, way early. So,
Hmm.
but then this mirror syndrome that can be extremely fatal to you. So,
Hmm.
did they kind of say we're noticing that it's starting to happen with you? Because was like your blood pressure high? Was your I mean, how why did they say that you had mirror syndrome or start of it?
He said that I was just at risk for it at that point.
Oh, okay,
He wanted me to take my blood pressure twice a day,
okay,
once when I woke up, once before bed. And if it was elevated at breakfast, he wanted me to check it in the middle of the day.
okay.
I said, okay. So I called my doctor and I was like, I know I'm not supposed to see you for another couple weeks, but I think I should come and see you Monday. And he was like, okay. So I came in
Good.
November 30th. We had Thanksgiving like that Thursday before
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, kind of did our thing.
Yeah.
And I went into the doctor's Monday. My mom was able to go with me to my regular doctor's appointment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're not high risk. They were allowing one support person
Yeah.
at
Okay.
each visit, but no more than that.
And
Um,
were you feeling okay, like physically?
I was okay. I kind of felt like a little bit short of breath, and I didn't know if it was just because I was like almost 20 weeks or if it
Mm-hmm.
was that,
What?
but I was very swollen.
Oh, okay. Just in general,
Um,
overall.
and like I had been a little bit swollen at Thanksgiving, but my mom was like, "You're really swollen today."
Oh, okay.
Like you could just see like you press in and it's like
Mm-hmm.
goofy. I
Yep.
had that going on. And I was like, "Okay." And they also check for protein in your urine
Yes.
when they're looking for preeclampsia and Mir syndrome. And mine was elevated, like it was high.
Mm-hmm.
And I was puffy. My blood pressure was high. I don't remember what it was over 130, which is really high for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "You need to deliver." He's like, "We're at the point now that if we wait anymore, you're going to be in the ER and we'll be wheeling you into labor and delivery
Yeah.
if I let you go home." And um, the hospital we go to is a Catholic hospital, and so they have the ethics committee.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to deliver at my stage, I was 19 weeks and 2 days. Um, I had to have ethics committee approval.
Oh, okay.
So he called and they said, do it. And he actually called my MFM and was like, I have Rebecca here. She's got this protein level, her blood pressure, she's puffy.
Yeah.
Headaches hadn't really started. Like I could feel pressure, but not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
headache.
Yeah.
I wasn't dizzy yet, but my MFM confirmed, like, you have Muir syndrome.
Yeah.
And if we let you go home, we can't.
Yeah.
And so they let me go home and grab my clothes,
Yeah.
switch cars.
Did you
And
call your fiance?
Yeah, he left work. He met me at home, showered,
Okay.
changed. I remember going home and because we lived with my in-laws at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and my father-in-law and my brother-in-law. And I remember like sitting on the floor of the kitchen and I was like, I have to go in and have the baby today. And my father-in-law was there for everything. He would talk to me every morning and we would have coffee and cry. And um, was drinking decaf. I did everything textbook right
Yeah.
for that pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I gave up caffeine and we would just sit there and cry.
Yeah.
And I was very thankful for that. I still am. But I remember going home and telling him, like, they said I have to deliver because if not, I'm not going to be here much longer.
Yeah.
So my fiance came home and we went to the hospital and got checked in and they let me have dinner. They didn't stop any of my food. I was allowed to eat whenever
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was weird because right when you go to labor and delivery, they
They.
stop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they gave me Cytotec and I began induction.
Hmm.
They asked me, I was very vocal throughout my whole thing that like when God and Liam decided it was time, then I would accept that, you know. And if I could, I wanted to do vaginal delivery. I did not want a D&C. I wanted to hold my baby.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to do a C-section, I had to do a C-section.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but I ended up with Cytotec and um, I got my first dose. It was late. I want to say 8 p.m. maybe.
On November 30th, right?
Yeah,
Just that later
yeah,
that evening. Okay.
yeah. It was my first one, and then a couple hours later, I got my next one, and I ended up getting sick from the Cytotec.
Mm.
And so I refused it a couple of times until my
Yeah.
doctor came in that morning. Like I had refused my last 2 doses,
Yeah.
and they ended up when the overnight doctor came in, he ended up having them insert the Cytotec vaginally
Yes.
because it's supposed to work faster.
Yeah.
And then I started getting sick from it, and I was like, I want to sleep. Like, just give me that. I don't want any more. Refused my last 2 doses, and I waited for the doctor.
Okay.
And I probably had 4 at that point.
Mm.
Before I started refusing. I was exhausted.
Oh, I was just going to ask, were you starting to feel like you were going into labor? Like, did you feel like you were starting to get cramps or any sort of
Mm-mm,
contractions? Nothing.
nothing.
Okay. Hmm. And then,
Mm-mm.
did they, this is pretty typical when you go give birth, they have a contraction monitor and then they also have like a heart rate monitor. Did you end up putting the heart rate monitor on?
No, they didn't even give me the option. I don't know if that was a call that my doctor made,
Mm.
but I remember not having. They had the blood pressure machine on me,
Yeah.
um, and the respirator, and like that was it.
Okay.
But they did not have any nothings on the
Any,
baby.
okay.
Because I did ask my doctor, I said, because he had a heartbeat at my appointment that morning. Um, and it was like 160, 162, something like that. And
Yeah.
so I was like, what are the chances of him coming out alive? Like,
Mm.
what am I looking at here? And he said, you have about a 50% chance based on what we saw this morning, right? It was just a fetal Doppler. I didn't have a scan.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And he said, either way, we will be prepared for both options. And I said, I don't want him to be in any pain. I want him to be comfortable. Whatever you have to do, make him comfortable. And he said, okay. He said, he's not going to be in pain. I have everything set up for either way it goes. And I said, okay. So we started Cytotec. And they were prepared. So my doctor comes back in the next morning and he said, do one more pill. I said, okay. And it was kind of cool. I had this same nurse that checked me in.
Mm-hmm.
They originally didn't have her with me, and then they did. Before her round started, they were like, no, we're gonna put you with her again, which I was really thankful for
Yeah.
because she was really nice. And being in that situation, I think I appreciated it more.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, fine. So she put the pill in again, and it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and then I started laboring.
Oh, you did?
I mean,
Okay.
hard,
It
yeah.
really was like that quick.
Yeah. I was like, I need an epidural. Like, I was screaming. I didn't do any birthing classes at that point. Like,
Yeah. You're
I
so
hadn't,
early.
my mom was not allowed to be there. It was only
Oh,
my fiance and I, like, um, and I was in pain. And they came in, did my epidural, and just like they do like that shot of medicine first before like hooking up the IV.
mhm.
And I just was like instant relief.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
Thank you.
and they beforehand they gave me IV fentanyl, and it worked for about half an hour. And afterwards I was like screaming again, and I was like, it's time for the epidural. They gave
Yeah.
me a heating pad, and that helped a little bit with like the back contractions.
Mhm.
And then I could just feel everything up front and then back to the back again. And I was like, it's time for an
Oh,
epidural.
yeah.
So after he put in the first like shot of the medicine, I just was like relief.
Yeah. Good.
And by 10:30 in the morning, he was delivered.
Oh,
Like my doctor wasn't even in the room. They were like setting up. He was in surgery, and I didn't push or anything. I was like, um, my water broke, and they're like, okay. And then 10, 15 minutes later, I said, I think he came out. Like
oh,
I had no idea what was going on. I just felt like something heavy,
something. Yeah.
you know. And they lifted up the sheet and there he was.
Oh my
And my
goodness.
nurse like scooped him up in her hands and was like sitting on the bed with me. And she was like, I'm sorry, but I can't pull, because the
Yes.
placenta's still inside. And I was like, okay. And I remember like looking over at Carl and he had to like turn away just because how little. And
Yeah.
I, I was like, is he breathing? And he said no. And when he came out, like I felt like a slide and like a turn.
Mm.
And I don't know if he was breathing and then not. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know that's something that's like stuck with me and something that I've been working in therapy with. Um, and Carl said that he saw his heart beating.
Oh,
Um, and by the time the nurse had scooped him up,
he
she
had.
said he was not responsive.
Oh.
And the doctor that was on call that night, he stays at the hospital because he lives like an hour away.
Mhm.
So when he does his rotation, the 3 or 4 days or whatever it is, he'll stay at the hospital.
Yeah.
And he came in and cut the cord. And my doctor came in and helped me deliver my placenta. And then they let me do skin to skin,
Oh, they did.
which was awesome. That was
Yeah.
something in my birth plan that I wanted, no matter the outcome.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, he's so little. Like I felt like a movie, like that's the first thing you always hear.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's just so little. And it, I, like, I knew he wasn't here, but like, I didn't really catch on to that until later.
Yeah.
Like, I just saw my baby like I had on the ultrasounds, I didn't see the fluid, I saw my
Your
baby.
baby. Your baby. Was he so you were able to do skin to skin, and how big was he? You said he's so little, but how big was he
Yeah.
in
He was 7.5 ounces or inches,
inches? Okay.
and then he was 11.5 ounces, so right under
Okay.
a pound.
Right under a pound.
So
Okay.
he was tiny.
Yeah.
And after like holding him for a while, like I could see the fluid that they were talking about,
Oh, okay.
and it was all down his back. And
Oh.
to me, like, I know it was in his legs and his arms, but like I have chubby hands. And so I was like, he's got mommy's hands. Like his little fingers look like mine. And I just, I saw my baby.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
see, the diagnoses.
yeah. You didn't see the sickness, you saw your baby.
Yeah.
Rebecca, I forgot to you found out early on that he was going to be a boy.
hmm
And so tell me, did you guys start thinking of his name pretty early on? Did you end up telling your fiance that it was a boy, likely
He,
going to be a
he,
boy?
everybody knew that it was a boy.
Okay.
It was actually kind of hard because Halloween time, I was holding my stepdaughter, and my belly, I showed very early.
Mm,
Um, I don't know if it's just because I'm short
uh,
and it
yeah,
doesn't have any way to do anything but stick
but
out.
just go out. That's me too. So I get you.
But I was showing early. And my father-in-law sent a picture to everyone in a group chat of me holding my stepdaughter.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, look at her bump. Oh my gosh, look at the baby. Like, no, nobody that was out of our direct circle knew that the baby was sick.
Yeah.
I quit posting bump photos. I was still taking them, but I wasn't posting them.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't doing stories about my pregnancy. Like, I just wasn't.
Yeah.
But for names, for a girl name, we knew it was going to be Allison.
Mm-hmm.
And for a boy, I really, really wanted Aiden.
Oh, okay. That's a cute name.
Um, and then once we found out that he was sick, it turned to Liam
Why did you choose Liam?
because it means strong-willed protector and warrior.
Oh,
So it just fit
yeah.
better. So I don't know. I was like, it's gonna be Aiden. And then after that first initial appointment, and then us like talking about it, I was like, maybe not.
Yeah.
So we went with Liam. We pushed Aiden's name to the side.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, it's gonna be Liam. He's a little
Yeah.
strong. He's a little strong guy.
hmm
So
Which
you
is more
guys,
fitting.
yeah. So you guys held him, had skin to skin. Were you able to do any other things to create memories or anything while
Um,
you were there?
the hospital had an OB tech who was with us, and she like went and found him a hat, and a blanket, and then they had like one of those gowns
Yeah.
that they get put in. I didn't think to buy anything like that. His cousin's wife was making him a blanket,
Yeah.
and we didn't get it until a couple weeks after.
Right.
And so, like, I always thought I was gonna have that with us.
Hmm.
And so I didn't really think I'm like, I don't even know how to buy clothes for that small of a baby.
Yeah.
And
He's
I
itty
looked
bitty.
it up, but it was like all from the UK,
Oh. Oh wow.
everything I was finding.
That was that small because you can't find like it's hard to find something that small, and
hmm
even like yeah, they just don't have them. I imagine that little hat was pretty big
Yeah,
on him
it
even.
yeah, it was like I remember when I was holding him after they had, like, cleaned him up and cleaned me up, and I was holding him, and I took it off so I could see
Yeah.
everything, and I couldn't get it back on, and I paged the nurse, and I said, "I need the OB tech back in here. I can't get his hat on." I said, "I messed him up," and I was crying, and she's like,
Oh,
"Honey, you didn't mess him up." And I was like, "Yes, I did. I can't put his hat on."
oh,
And so it's funny, like, thinking back on it now, but I was
yeah,
really upset that I
yeah,
couldn't put the hat back on him.
yeah.
And he had, like, a little blanket,
Uh-huh.
and it had snowflakes on it, and it was blue, and
Uh,
I slept with it for months after.
yeah, I am sure you did. Just smelling it
Even
and
now, I
yeah,
still sometimes do.
yeah.
It's been a while, but we did the handprints and the footprints.
Oh, good. Okay.
I wish, like, looking back on it, I wish I would have brought paint to do it because with his sister, we have always done hand and footprints with paint and
Yeah.
everything and paper cutouts and stuff like that. Like, I wish I would have done more
Mhm.
with that, but we have the hospital ones and they're perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Well, good. I'm so glad
yeah.
they did that. And I do wanna just point out that Liam was born at 19 weeks, just over 19 weeks. Is that right?
19 weeks and 3 days.
So he
So they considered him a fetal demise
Mhm.
because he was in this weird limbo of not a miscarriage, but not a stillbirth
Yeah.
by the state of Indiana.
Yeah.
So he did not qualify for a birth certificate. He got a death certificate, but not a
Mm.
birth certificate.
Yeah.
That's kind of been hard for me to process.
Yes. It really is so like, every state is different too. That's the other thing that's
Hmm.
crazy, Rebecca, is that every state has their own kind of regulations and such. So, yeah, I can imagine that is hard to just have a death certificate because you gave
Yeah,
birth to him.
yeah. And so I was like, if my appointment had been Thursday instead of Monday,
Hmm.
and he was born Friday, I would have had a birth certificate for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case.
Were you able to have other people come up and meet Liam, or was it so it was just you guys? It was you and Carl.
Yeah, I didn't ask because I didn't want to put them in that position.
Mhm. Mhm.
With COVID going on, like it was really bad then.
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about it, nothing. It was very new.
Yes.
Um, and we FaceTimed with my mom so she
Oh,
could see him.
okay.
And then the hospital took pictures of Liam for us
Oh, good.
and printed them out. And they gave us like this memory box, and it had like the three of our wristbands. And they had like a charity around here makes like little padded hearts
Mm.
and like a diaper with a safety pin.
Mm.
Um, and then they had like his birth stats on a couple of different pieces of paper, his photos. There's like a journal in there. It's all kinds of stuff. And it's a really pretty white box.
Yeah.
It's in that picture of the shelf that I sent you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's up there with all of his stuff.
Awesome.
And then they have a charity that's like worldwide, and they send you home with a stuffed animal so you don't leave the hospital empty-handed.
Yeah.
So,
It's hard to have just that stuffed animal. It's like, oh,
mhm,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Did Carl end up holding Liam? Did he spend time with him?
He was scared too. He said when the nurse was doing his hand and footprints, she like bumped his nose, like trying to move his hand, and fluid came out, and it scared him.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't want like to like his arm fall off or something.
Yeah. Well, they're so
Um,
fragile. So I totally get
yeah,
where he's coming from.
yeah. He was there with me the whole time though, and
Hmm.
my room was huge,
Mm.
and it was like a half a wall, and there was like a seating area with
Oh,
couches and chairs.
that's so nice.
And after like they were like having me deliver after I delivered the placenta and they were like cleaning me up, he went over there and took his time to process while they were getting me cleaned up. But he couldn't hold him. It was hard.
Yeah. It is hard. It is hard. Were there any regulations at your hospital, though, for how long you could keep
No.
Liam
Um,
with you?
my doctor, he told me as long as I wanted to.
Oh.
They had the cuddle cot
Mhm.
where they keep them cool so there's not like any smells or anything where we can place him so I could eat and get up and do what I needed to. And I want to say about like an hour and a half after delivering him, and after getting cleaned up and changed and everything, they brought me my tray of food and I was just kind of staring at him, at the baby, and I just started crying. And the nurses were starting to come in to do something. I don't know if it was blood pressure check or whatever. And they ended up just stopped and turned around and left because I couldn't.
Yeah.
It had finally hit me like my son is here. He's no longer in me. He is gone. Um, and I needed time to process that. It was just really, it was about probably an hour and a half after I delivered. Just staring at him like this just happened.
Yeah. And it's devastating and earth shattering, and I'm glad there was like you saw like that you needed to sit with it and just sort of realize what happened.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to kind of get caught up in all the pain and the epidural and
Yeah.
delivering the placenta. Like it just is, it's a flurry of activity. So,
My doctor said as long as I wanted to be there, I could be there. And we had my mom called the funeral home
mm,
for me because I said I can't make this call.
yeah.
So a couple weeks beforehand, she made the call and set up all the arrangements. And they said, "Okay, we have everything that we need. When the time comes, give us a call, and we'll come and get him."
Mm,
I said, "Okay." So I couldn't do it though. We sat there, and it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said, "I think it's time." You know,
yeah.
I I wanted more time, but I also wanted to be able to go home that night.
Yeah.
I didn't want to sleep in the hospital and him not be there.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just it was like I wish I could just stay here and just hold him and, do all the things normal. And I said, but if we want to go home tonight, like I think it's time. And Carl said, I think so. So we paged the nurse and they called the funeral home and we waited. And they came in. I guess the home called them when they were on their way. And they brought in this little casket box
Oh,
with a bow and put it on the counter. And um, I held him and they were like, "Do you want us to put him in there?" And I said, "No, I need to do that. Like, as his mother, this is what I need to do." So they took one more picture of me standing and holding him. If you zoom in, you can see the casket behind me. And I put this little stuffed animal that the hospital had given us. He was probably about his size. And I left him in his gown and I kept his hat and his blanket. And I put the stuffed animal in there because I didn't want him to be alone. And I put the lid on and I tied the bow. It was green and satin. And actually, after we told them to go ahead and call the funeral home, the priest that was there came in and prayed, and we did a baptism for him. And then we did the casket, but it was just us and our nurse. And I said a little prayer, and then I let them take him. And then I remember like walking backwards and like grabbing Carl because I felt really weak. And then he held me and helped me get back to bed.
I'm so sorry.
And my doctor came in and he said, "Are you ready to go home?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I'm discharging you. Still take your blood pressure, and I want to see you in my office Monday morning." I said, "Okay." So I got dressed and I went home. And the next day we went and got my stepdaughter from daycare. And my parents took her, my mom and my stepdad, because I was in no place.
Yeah.
Her mom had to work and couldn't take off. So my parents took her for a couple days. And my parents came and brought us food.
Yeah.
And I showed them pictures of him because my stepdad was working when I FaceTimed my mom, so he didn't get to see. And I remember going to that doctor's appointment Monday, and I was alone. And I had brought thank you. I made ornaments for my nurse and my OB tech
Oh.
and wrote them a thank you card. And I asked my doctor if he would give it to them. But I sat in that room, in the waiting room, for like 45 minutes. And there was babies everywhere.
Yeah. That is like, oh.
Everywhere. Like either in the belly, they were there for their first appointment, their middle appointment, their last appointment, newborns, 3-month-old. There was like 6 babies in there. And then me. And I could just feel my heart racing. And I went up to the window and I said, "I'm supposed to be here for a nurse visit, like BB check. I'm sure like my doctor wants to come and check on me." I said, "But I lost my son a week ago. I can't be out here anymore. So if it's gonna be any longer, I'm gonna have to come back because I can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
And not even a minute later, they pulled me.
That's
And
great.
I know there was one more person in front of me, but I couldn't take it. And they put me in a room, did my vitals, checked my urine. My protein had been better. My blood pressure was still slightly elevated, nothing crazy. My swelling had gone down. And I saw him a few weeks later, but that first initial appointment was awful. And he came in and his NP to check on me before I could leave, which I cannot say more great things about them. Like
Yeah.
they've been amazing. And if I was there to see him, she would stop in and say
Good.
hi,
That's
and
good.
vice versa. And like they give me hugs, tissues, wipe my tears, like everything. And they're just amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that I can imagine that was so hard.
The day after I got home from the hospital, the genetics counselor had called. Our second results of the amnio came in.
Okay.
They were normal.
Okay.
Said okay. She said, "Do you want me to run the third one?" She said, "I understand you had your baby yesterday, and I want to be respectful and mindful of that." And she said, "Do you want me to tell the lab to go ahead and process the third test?"
Yeah.
I said, "Absolutely." You guys stuck a needle in my belly
Yeah. Let's get all the
for
information.
me to find these results out, you know? And she said, "Okay." She said it's gonna be about another 2 weeks and we'll go from there.
Okay.
And I said, okay. 2 weeks later, he was diagnosed with Noonan Syndrome, and that was the cause of Hydrops, cystic hygroma, hypoplastic left heart syndrome.
All of it.
And I said, so what is the next step? And she said, now you come into my office and we're going to do a cheek swab of DNA for both of you.
Oh, okay.
And you're going to do genetics testing to see if you guys are carriers of Noonan syndrome. And I said, okay. So it was the week of Christmas. And we went in and we did our testing and we dropped it off at CVS at the little FedEx
Yeah.
spot. And we sent off our sample. And I literally felt like somebody was like holding my head underwater for weeks. I didn't eat a whole lot. I ate popcorn and I drank Pepsi and like every day. And I would have dinner and like that was it.
Yeah.
And I went to an annual routine checkup with my primary care, and she literally spent an hour and a half with me just talking to me and being there and listened to me and let me cry and just checked on me, and it was amazing.
That's amazing.
Um, and I began therapy that next week, or I think I started a little bit before then. I think it was the week after we lost Liam. I had been trying to call him, my therapist that I had seen previously, and he was like out of town or something, and what didn't call me until like a week
Until
after we lost the baby, and then I started appointments. But I was like going weekly for that and trying to like process Liam and losing him and all the things. And on January 12th, after I left the primary care's office, I got a phone call from the genetics counselor that our results were in. And she said, neither one of you are carriers.
Oh,
And I literally like gasped with air, like I felt like I could breathe again.
yeah. Yeah,
I've
because I can
never
imagine. Mm,
I've never felt something like that. Like it was just so powerful when she said that. I was like, what? And she said they call it de novo or something like that, where it's like a one-off chance.
yeah.
She said that they say we have a 1 to 3% chance of it reoccurring again.
Okay.
They can't say zero because it happened once.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
But
but
essentially, she was saying it was kind of a fluke.
yeah, she said we call it genetic fluke, de novo. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but and that they foresee healthy pregnancies later on.
Okay.
And I said, okay.
Yeah, that probably was I mean, you know, what happened, but then also this
Hmm.
whole genetic fluke thing is not reassuring either too at the same time, I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, okay, great, but why did this happen?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's something like I still see my therapist regularly. Some weeks it's every week, sometimes it's every other,
Yeah.
every other week. If not every week, sometimes it's twice a week. It just depends on
Where you're at and
where I'm at, scheduling,
yeah.
all the things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
Um,
Rebecca, did you guys end up you Liam was taken to that funeral home that your mom had set up already. Were you guys planning on doing a funeral or a memorial, or how was that going to look afterward?
we didn't do like a funeral or memorial. We got him cremated,
Yeah.
and I wanted him home with us. I know if he was in a cemetery, I would have lived there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Indiana, it's cold. It's very cold. And I was like, I want him home. I want him next to my bed. Like, I want him here with us where
Yeah.
he belongs.
Yeah.
So we got him cremated, and my parents got me a pendant of a teddy bear.
Oh,
And I
okay.
have some of his ashes in this. And then I
Okay.
have like a little baby urn
Uh-huh.
too. And it's like light blue and it's a heart. And that's on his shelf as well.
Oh, cute.
When I was pregnant, we actually because we kept hearing his heart would stop on its own, right? They have this little boutique about an hour away from us in Illinois that records heartbeats, and we
Yeah.
got his heartbeat recorded and put
Oh,
into a stuffed monkey,
oh, that's
and
so cool.
so that was really neat to do
Yeah.
just because, heart condition, his heart's gonna stop on its own, and I said, "We need to document that,"
Mhm. That is
so
so
we have that.
cool.
Yeah,
I love that so much.
yeah.
That's so cute.
So, and it's a monkey,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's nice.
Rebecca, I'm so sorry for your loss. I
Thank you.
just hearing all that you went through, I just it's so much. Is there any last thing that you want to tell us about your little Liam?
I just I always think back of his ultrasounds, because you see your baby,
Yeah.
and he would, like, wave and grab his toes and clap and, like, all these cute baby things that are normal for babies to
Yeah.
do, and I just remember, like, really focusing on those after having him and delivering him,
Yeah.
and even, like, now, his hand and footprints just are my favorite because 'cause they're so tiny.
And that's your
They're
baby.
special. It's my baby.
Well, thank you again, Rebecca, for sharing his story with us
Thank you.
and his and your journey through all of this. So, thank you again.